Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is the verbatim federal courtroom testimony of the Sean Diddy Combs trial as reported by Inner City Press. What? Did Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson reveal that left hardened court officers wiping their eyes? Why did his powerful testimony cause multiple jurors to openly weep? And what connection to Diddy's past did The Rock expose that prosecutors are calling the missing piece in their case? If you want to understand the emotional bombshell moment that has permanently altered the course of this historic trial, make sure to watch this entire video. Like and subscribe now to stay updated on all the developments in this unprecedented case. In a federal courtroom where Sean Diddy Combs faces serious charges, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson took the stand not as a Hollywood action hero or former wrestling superstar, but as a solemn witness with an account so powerful it transcended the typical boundaries of courtroom decorum. His commanding presence immediately transformed the atmosphere. But it was his words delivered with unmistakable sincerity and raw emotion that truly broke through the usual clinical nature of legal proceedings. As Johnson recounted events from early in his entertainment career, the impact on everyone present was visible. Seasoned attorneys paused their note-taking. Court reporters struggled to maintain their professional composure. Even the judge, known for maintaining strict control of her courtroom, appeared visibly moved. Why would The Rock, who has carefully built his reputation as one of Hollywood's most bankable and beloved stars, risk involvement in such a controversial case? What compelling moral obligation drove him to come forward? And what did he witness that was so profoundly disturbing that recounting it moved an entire courtroom to tears? This isn't just celebrity testimony. It's a pivotal human moment in a case that's exposing the entertainment industry's darkest corners. The full story, unfiltered and deeply moving, begins now. I'm standing in front of the Manhattan Federal Courthouse where just moments ago, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson exited after delivering what legal observers are calling the most emotionally impactful testimony in the ongoing trial of Sean Diddy Combs. Johnson moved quickly through the gathered crowd, his expression somber and resolute as he declined to answer questions from the press. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere had been transformed by Johnson's powerful presence and even more powerful words. Standing at 6 feet 5 inches in and dressed in a perfectly tailored dark gray suit, Johnson commanded attention the moment he entered, yet carried himself with a humility that seemed at odds with his larger-than-life public persona. Nobody expected The Rock to appear today. The room was tense with anticipation of technical testimony from financial experts. Eyes focused on the witness stand until the bailiff announced his name. Gasps echoed through the gallery. Even the judge seemed momentarily taken aback. There was no advance notice. No media speculation had anticipated it. There he stood, Dwayne Johnson, one of entertainment's most successful crossover stars, ready to testify. Until that moment, Diddy had maintained his composure throughout the proceedings, occasionally conferring with his legal team or making notes. But something visibly shifted when Johnson entered. Maybe it was seeing someone whose physical presence couldn't be intimidated. Maybe it was knowing what interactions from their past might be revealed. Maybe it was realizing that his carefully constructed defense was about to face a credibility test from someone the public inherently trusts. Whatever it was, Diddy's confident demeanor began to crack. Johnson wasn't there as a global superstar with blockbuster movies and millions of followers. He was there as a man who had navigated the entertainment industry from different angles. A wrestler, as an actor, as a producer, and had seen its mechanics from multiple perspectives, and when he began his testimony, delivered in his characteristic measured cadence, but with unusual emotional vulnerability. The courtroom wasn't prepared for what they would hear. Because what Johnson revealed about his early career encounters with Diddy, the disturbing events he witnessed, and the victims he attempted to help wasn't just shocking. It was a first-hand account delivered with such genuine emotion that it transcended the typical boundaries between witness testimony and human connection. It started like any other day of the trial. The room buzzed with low conversations. The press hunched in their designated rows and lawyers organized documents as they prepared for what was expected to be a technically complex day of financial testimony. But when the bailiff announced the United States calls Dwayne Johnson to the stand, the room changed instantly. You could hear a pin drop. Some people exchanged startled glances. Others craned their necks toward the entrance. The prosecution team maintained composed expressions, suggesting they had managed to keep this high-profile witness completely confidential. The judge raised an eyebrow, and Diddy, who'd been reviewing documents with his attorneys, suddenly looked up at expression shifting from confusion to visible concern. Johnson walked to the witness stand with measured steps, his imposing physical presence somehow tempered by an air of respectful semiety. He didn't acknowledge, did he? Didn't play to the gallery, simply focused on the task at hand. I'm here today because there are moments in life when staying silent becomes a form of complicity. Johnson began after being sworn in. This is one of those moments. The judge allowed him to continue. The entire trial shifted because what Johnson was about to say wasn't speculation or second-hand information. It was a first-hand account from someone with nothing to gain and potentially much to risk by coming forward. Johnson explained that his history with Diddy dated back to the late 1990s and early 2000s when he was transitioning from his wrestling career to his early acting roles. Their professional worlds intersected at entertainment events, award shows, and industry gatherings. The entertainment industry is interconnected in ways most people don't realize, Johnson testified. Wrestling, music, film, they're all part of the same ecosystem. During that period of my career transition, I was learning the landscape, meeting everyone I could, understanding how things worked beyond the wrestling world. I knew the relationship seemed limited to professional acquaintances. They weren't friends, but they moved in overlapping circles during a formative period in Johnson's broader entertainment career. That changed, Johnson explained, after specific events he witnessed in 2001. There was an industry event, a private party after the MTV Movie Awards, he continued. Many celebrities were there along with people trying to break into the industry. I arrived late because of another commitment, and what I saw troubled me deeply. The judge leaned forward, engaged by Johnson's testimony. Diddy's attorney attempted to object on grounds of relevance, but was overruled when the prosecution explained that this established the context for what followed. I observed Sean interacting with several young women who appeared to be aspiring artists, Johnson continued, his voice maintaining its strength, but with a new undertone of controlled emotion. The power dynamic was immediately clear and concerning. They seemed afraid. I've witnessed many difficult things throughout my life, Johnson said, his voice growing more measured. I grew up seeing financial struggles. I've experienced professional setbacks and personal losses. I've worked in industries known for their intensity, but nothing prepared me for what I witnessed that night. And in the events that followed, he turned slightly toward where Diddy sat and Sean Combs was at the center of it. Johnson told the courtroom that it started, like many troubling situations in Hollywood, with behavior that could be dismissed as just how things work in the industry. It came through observation rather than direct involvement. The way people behaved around Diddy, the difference shown, the anxiety visible in the faces of younger artists and aspiring entertainers. He expected some degree of hierarchy in the industry. Of course, he'd seen that in wrestling, but this felt different, more controlling. But the moment he realized something deeply concerning was happening was when he encountered a young woman crying in a secluded area of the venue. The second he approached to ask if she needed help, he saw her visible fear intensify. That should have been the first red flag. She said everything was fine. You know, just the pressure of the industry, but it felt like something else, like she was afraid to speak honestly. Johnson described how he gave her his contact information. I told her if she ever needed help or just someone to talk to, she could reach out. I didn't hear from her that night, but 3 days later, I received a call. As Johnson recounted the subsequent conversation, his typically unwavering voice showed the first signs of emotion. She told me she was an aspiring singer who had been invited to what she thought was a professional meeting with Diddy and his team. What she described experiencing there wasn't a meeting. It was exploitation. Johnson paused, visibly collecting himself. Several jurors leaned forward, completely engaged. She described being pressured to consume substances, being recorded without consent, and being told explicitly that her music career depended on being part of the family and understanding how things work. She was 19 years old. The courtroom remained absolutely silent as Johnson described how he helped connect this young woman with resources for support and legal advice. What affected me most wasn't just what she described, it was her fear. She was terrified that by simply telling someone what happened, her safety and any chance at a career would be destroyed. Johnson said what began with helping one young woman soon expanded as she connected him with others who had similar experiences, thinking they would do a standard meeting about their music or career. Instead, what they encountered were situations designed to compromise and control them. There were patterns in their stories. Isolation from support systems. Introduction to substance use. Recording of compromising situations could ruin them before their careers even began. And throughout these accounts, Diddy's name appeared repeatedly. Johnson paused, his expression grave. I was raised by strong women. My grandmother, my mother, they shaped who I am. The way these young women were being treated, it went against everything I believe about how people should be treated, especially those with less power or protection. Johnson continued, his voice steady but resolute. After hearing multiple similar stories, I tried to intervene more directly. I spoke with security personnel who worked these events. I tried to use whatever influence I had to create safer environments. I received a call from someone close to Sean. They suggested I was misunderstanding how the music business works and that I should stay in my lane. There was an implication that if I continued, opportunities in the broader entertainment industry might become limited for me. Johnson testified that while these attempts at intimidation concerned him, they didn't deter him. I was fortunate. By that point, my wrestling career had given me enough recognition and financial stability that I had options. Many of these young artists had none. Their entire future hinged on staying in the good graces of powerful industry figures. The judge had stopped taking notes and was simply listening. Diddy had gone from occasionally whispering to his attorneys to sitting completely still. His expression tense were networks of facilitators, enablers, people who arranged these meetings, who provided the locations, who helped cover things up afterward. It was organized. The prosecution then produced emails and text messages obtained during the investigation that appeared to corroborate aspects of Johnson's account. Johnson's voice took on new emotional weight as he described what happened next. I continued trying to help behind the scenes. I connected victims with resources, legal support, counseling. I used the relationships I was building in my acting career to create alternative opportunities for some of these young artists. But the system was bigger than any individual effort. Then I received a call that changed everything. Johnson explained that one of the young women he had been helping, a talented singer from Detroit, had taken her own life. Her sister called me. She said before she died, she had named several powerful men in the industry who had abused their positions, including Sean. She had documentation recordings, but she couldn't see a way forward. Couldn't imagine escaping their influence in building a career, remained completely silent as he took a moment to compose himself. Several jurors were openly crying. I attended her funeral, Johnson continued. Her family had no idea about these aspects of her life, talent, her kindness, her hopes, knowing what I knew about what she had experienced, and feeling like I had failed her by not doing more. Johnson looked around the courtroom. The music industry doesn't just control careers. It shapes lives. Anne leaned closer to the microphone. That was my breaking point. I realized that working quietly within the system wasn't enough. The system itself needed exposure and accountability. Johnson's voice became more resolute. After the funeral, I decided to confront Sean directly. This wasn't about my career or his. It was about basic human dignity and protecting vulnerable people in an industry known for exploitation. He said he arranged a meeting through mutual connections, insisting it be in a public place, private room at a restaurant in Los Angeles. With his own security present when I laid out what I knew, the stories I'd heard directly from victims, Sean's initial response was dismissive. Nobody forces them. Johnson described how the conversation escalated as he challenged this perspective. I told him that power imbalance negates genuine consent. He described feeling a fundamental moral disconnect in that moment. Sean then said something I've never forgotten. He looked me directly in the eye and said, "Look, we all have our methods. Don't act like your hands are clean in this industry." As Johnson recounted these words, I told him my hands were clean of exploitation and abuse. I told him there's a difference between playing the industry game and destroying lives. I told him that if these stories continued, if more women were hurt, I wouldn't stay quiet, Johnson said. Diddy's demeanor changed. Then he became very calm, very controlled. You've built something good. Think carefully about whether this is a battle worth fighting. Some fights leave everyone damaged. At this point in the testimony, Johnson looked directly at Diddy for the first time. I understood exactly what he meant. It wasn't just about me. It was about potential repercussions for anyone associated with me professionally, personally. It was a reminder of his connections and influence. The prosecutor asked, "What did you do after this conversation, Mr. Johnson?" Johnson's response was measured but powerful. I increased my behind-the-scenes efforts to support victims. I established quiet relationships with trustworthy journalists to ensure that if victims wanted to tell their stories, they'd have ethical outlets to do so, and I began documenting everything I learned, creating a secure record that could someday help establish the truth. Johnson then described the final incident that brought him to court today. Learning, she called to tell me she had finally found the courage to come forward. She said, "You told me years ago that someday the truth would matter. I couldn't refuse. Some moments define us by how we respond to them." This was one of those moments. As Johnson concluded this part of his testimony, the emotional impact on the courtroom was palpable. 2 jurors were openly wiping away tears. The prosecutor himself appeared to be fighting emotion. Recess, an unusual step that acknowledged the emotional weight of what had just transpired. As people filed out of the courtroom, many appeared visibly moved, some discussing in hushed tones what they had witnessed. After the recess, Diddy's lead attorney attempted to recover with cross-examination, trying to portray Johnson's actions as those of someone with a savior complex who had inserted himself into situations he didn't fully understand. Mr. Johnson, isn't it possible that your background in professional wrestling with its scripted narratives of heroes and villains has colored how you interpreted these industry interactions? The attorney asked. Johnson's response was thoughtful and measured. Professional wrestling taught me many things, including how power dynamics work and how narratives can be controlled. But what I witnessed wasn't a performance or a misunderstanding. What I have is consistent testimony from multiple victims who named your client specifically, documentation of his presence at events where exploitation occurred, and my direct conversation with him where he essentially defended these practices. As how the industry works, the prosecutors have the detailed evidence those women provided. I'm here to corroborate their accounts and provide context about the system that enabled this behavior. Each attempt to undermine Johnson's credibility seemed to backfire as his responses remained measured, thoughtful, and authentic. The jury appeared to be assessing him not as a celebrity, but as a credible witness whose testimony aligned with other evidence they had heard. When Johnson was finally excused from the witness stand, he walked from the courtroom with the same dignified composure with which he had entered. He didn't look back at Diddy, didn't play to the gallery, simply exited with purpose outside the courtroom. The entertainment industry was already experiencing seismic aftershocks. Social media exploded with reactions, with many industry figures posting messages of support for Johnson's courage. The hashtag #ThankYouRock began trending as survivors of industry exploitation expressed gratitude for his willingness to use his platform to corroborate their experiences. Behind closed doors, crisis meetings were being called at entertainment companies throughout Los Angeles and New York. Legal departments began reviewing protocols and historical complaints. Public relations teams crafted statements about zero tolerance and commitment to safe working environments. But the conversation had fundamentally shifted from abstract policies to specific accountability. As the day's proceedings ended and attendees filed out of the courthouse, legal analysts were already describing Johnson's testimony as a watershed moment. Not just for this specific case, but for how the entertainment industry confronts long-standing patterns of exploitation and abuse of power. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, known for his strength and larger-than-life persona on screen, had demonstrated a different kind of strength, the moral courage to speak truth in a system designed to reward silence. In doing so, he had not only potentially altered the outcome of this high-profile trial, but it also helped validate the experiences of countless victims whose stories might otherwise have remained unheard. The question now wasn't just whether this testimony would affect the verdict in Diddy's case, but how many others might be inspired to come forward and what other industry practices might soon face similar scrutiny. What happens next in this groundbreaking trial? Will more entertainment figures break their silence? And how will the industry change in response to these powerful revelations? Make sure you like and subscribe to stay updated on all the latest developments in this historic case. The truth is finally emerging, and you won't want to miss what happens next as this industry testimony continues to reverberate throughout the entertainment